A blunder is simply a memory that hasn't had enough time to become funny yet. Welcome again to your Live Light Life Nuggets. And the theme of Nugget 148 is George and his Big Bertha. One of the funniest blunders I ever heard of happened in a small town church where everyone knew everyone else's business before they knew it themselves. The main character was a dear gentleman named George. George was one of those people blessed with confidence far exceeding his technical ability. If he didn't know how to do something, he simply assumed he did. One Saturday morning, the pastor asked George to handle the PowerPoint slides during the Sunday service. Easy, George replied. I've worked with computers before. Nobody asked for details. As it turned out, George's computer experience consisted mainly of switching his laptop on and off and occasionally playing solitaire. The service began smoothly. The opening hymn appeared on the screen. The congregation sang beautifully. Then came the announcements. George confidently clicked the mouse. Instead of the church announcements, the congregation was greeted by a giant photograph of George's prize-winning pumpkin from the local agricultural show. The pastor froze. The congregation froze. George smiled proudly and whispered, rather loudly, That's Bertha. She weighed 18 kilograms. The church burst out laughing. Flustered, George clicked frantically. The pumpkin disappeared. Unfortunately, it was replaced by his holiday photos. There was George on a beach, George eating ice cream, George standing next to a sign that read, Beware of crocodiles, George posing next to a statue while wearing socks with sandals. The congregation laughed so hard that some people were wiping tears from their eyes. The pastor eventually walked over and gently suggested they continue without visual aids. But George wasn't finished. Oh no, he said, I can fix this. Those words have launched many disasters throughout human history. While trying to correct the problem, George somehow connected his phone to the sound system. Suddenly, the church speakers blasted a ringtone that sounded like a rooster being stepped on. The entire sanctuary echoed with cock-a-doodle-doo. Several elderly ladies nearly fell off their chairs. One man laughed so hard he had to leave the room. Eventually, the service continued, or at least they tried. But now everyone was nervous whenever George touched the computer. Every click produced a visible reaction from the audience. People ducked, some covered their eyes, others prayed. When the service finally ended, George looked utterly embarrassed. I've ruined everything, he muttered. But the pastor put an arm around his shoulder and smiled. You've done exactly the opposite. George looked puzzled. The pastor continued. People came here carrying heavy burdens today. Some are worried about their finances. Some are grieving. Some are lonely. For 1 hour, they forgot their troubles and laughed together. And he was right. For months afterward, people still spoke about the great pumpkin service. Whenever church members felt stressed, somebody would quietly ask, How's Bertha doing? And everyone would start laughing all over again. The funny thing about blunders is that we spend enormous energy trying to avoid them. We fear looking foolish. We fear making mistakes. We fear being embarrassed. Yet some of life's best memories come wrapped inside our biggest mistakes. Nobody remembers the 100 church services where everything went perfectly. Everybody remembers the pumpkin. Nobody tells stories about flawless presentations. They tell stories about the microphone left switched on, the forgotten speech, the wrong turn, the accidental text message, or the cake that just collapsed before the guests arrived. Perfection impresses people briefly. Imperfection connects people deeply. Sometimes the moments that make us want to disappear under a chair become the very memories that bring joy for years afterward. And if all else fails, remember George's rule. Before volunteering to run the church's PowerPoint, make absolutely certain your prize-winning pumpkin photos are not in the presentation, especially if the pumpkin's name is Bertha. And always remember, every blunder carries two gifts, a lesson for today and a story for tomorrow. Enjoy your weekend and trust the Holy Spirit to revitalize your body, soul and spirit. Love and regards, Bertha.